Jackson K didn't ask for this. He didn't ask to be summoned mid-lunch break by a swarm of Imperial drones. Didn't ask for the genetic scan that confirmed his DNA matched an extinct royal bloodline. And he definitely didn't ask to be told he was now Emperor of the Triune Star Coalition, a government he'd never even heard of until today. "Let me get this straight," he said, still chewing the end of a nutrient bar. "You're telling me I've inherited a space empire because my grandma once dated an alien duke?" "Technically," replied the Imperial Protocol unit hovering nearby, "you are the last surviving heir of the Sirathi dynastic line through unrecorded hybridization. Congratulations, Your Majesty." Jackson blinked. "I fix rusted star freighters for a living." "Yes," the drone said, "and now you rule 7 systems, 4 trade unions, and 1 very displeased warrior bride." "Wait, what?" "C'est reconom." 3 hours later, Jackson was standing on a polished obsidian floor that stretched for miles in every direction. At the far end of the throne hall, arms folded across armored chest, stood General Kalara Ven, the Blade of Razan, 8 feet tall, eyes like supernova cores. A scar ran from her temple down her cheek, and the massive plasma glaive on her back looked like it had tasted more blood than Jackson had tasted coffee. "You," she growled, "are not my emperor." Jackson gave a weak smile. "Honestly, I agree." But the coalition didn't care about their feelings. Law was law. The Air Bond Protocol had been invoked, and Kalara, the Empire's strongest military asset, was now legally bound to protect Jackson as his designated martial consort until a new ruling line could be secured or until the mandatory 1-year union expired. She had already petitioned the High Court for an annulment 3 times, all denied. By day 5, Jackson had learned alien thrones are uncomfortable. Imperial robes are weirdly itchy, and Kalara Ven could paralyze a room with one glance. She treated him like a nuisance, an obligation, a ticking political bomb she was forced to babysit. But Jackson wasn't just going to survive. He was going to figure her out. And maybe, just maybe, make her smile. Even once. "Don't move," Kalara said. Jackson had already moved. He had moved directly into the path of a thermal grenade, tripped over his own imperial robe, and landed flat on his back behind the buffet table. He blinked at the ceiling of the Great Hall, listening to the sound of panic echoing from the diplomatic reception. Then came the sharp hum of a plasma glaive slicing through the air like a vengeful comet. Kalara's voice again low and lethal. "Target neutralized. 4 remaining." Jackson propped himself up just in time to see her dive through a curtain of fire and tackle 2 assassins in one movement. It was like watching a dance if the dance involved dismemberment and thunderous rage. One of the guests screamed. Another tried to flee and was cut down by crossfire. A third just stood there filming with a neural recorder. "Stay down, idiot," someone barked, probably Kalara, though Jackson was too dazed to tell. He wasn't supposed to be here, not really. He was supposed to be in his quarters pretending to review tax reforms, not standing in front of half the galaxy in borrowed royal boots that squeaked when he walked. But then came the explosion, and he'd moved without thinking. And now Kalara was bleeding. She stood above him again, breathing hard smoke curling around her sharp features. Her armor had been split across the shoulder blood, dark as wine seeped from beneath. Her eyes glowed. "You are the most exasperating male I've ever met." Jackson blinked. "You saved me." "No," she snapped. "I saved the Empire's insurance policy." But when she extended a hand to help him up, her grip was firm and lingered a second longer than it needed to. Later in the aftermath chamber, Jackson sat on a bench with ice pressed to his ribs. Kalara stood at the far end of the room, arms folded, watching a tactical playback on the wall. Her profile was all sharp lines and control. But when she glanced back at him, her expression softened for a split second. "You stepped in front of a grenade." "I didn't know it was a grenade. I thought it was a buffet tray." Kalara sighed. "You're going to die young." "Maybe, but hey, at least I'll die majestic." She didn't laugh, but her lip twitched. That night, as guards swept the palace for infiltrators, Jackson found a small package outside his door. Inside was a custom-modified stunner gauntlet, slim, powerful, fitted perfectly to his hand. Engraved in neat alien script, "If you insist on jumping into danger, at least hit back." He smiled. Maybe she wasn't going to kill him in his sleep after all. Again, Kalara said. Jackson groaned and wiped sweat from his forehead. Pretty sure my arm's dislocated. Then relocated, she replied, spinning her staff and knocking his out of his hands for the 7th time that hour. Training began at dawn, not by his choice. Apparently, one near-death experience was all it took for Kalara Venn to declare him an unacceptable liability in open combat. So now, every morning he was battered by a woman who could punch through a titanium wall before breakfast. You keep dropping your left, she said. Because I'm left-handed. Then drop the right. That's not how symmetry works. Kalara didn't reply. She just threw another strike at him, slower this time. He dodged barely. Better, she muttered. It almost sounded like encouragement. By day 7 of combat training, Jackson had 2 bruised ribs, 1 cracked tooth, and a growing suspicion that Kalara was beginning to enjoy this. By day 10, he landed his first hit. It wasn't much, a glancing blow across her hip during a mock spar, but she froze, eyes narrowing, then nodded once. You're learning. You say that like it surprises you. It does. Outside the training arena, their routine became weirder. Kalara stopped ignoring him at mealtimes. She corrected his galactic pronunciation during diplomatic briefings quietly without mocking him. She once threw a dagger across a council chamber to stop an ambassador from insulting him again. And every evening, she'd appear at the edge of the garden platform, not saying anything, just watching stars. Sometimes he joined her, said nothing, let the silence stretch. It was the most peace he got all day. One night as they walked back from a late briefing, she handed him a data pad. What's this, he asked. A report. From who we are for Serpiti, me? Jackson blinked. You wrote a report on me. Performance assessment. I'm required to. He skimmed the top line. Subject exhibits irregular combat aptitude, but shows resilience, situational creativity, and an alarming tendency to survive against odds. He looked up, raising an eyebrow. Alarming. She smirked. Statistically improbable. Later that night, Jackson sat alone in his quarters, bruises blooming under his shirt, reading the rest of the report. At the end, in small, uncharacteristically neat script, Kalara had written, he is not a soldier, but he does not retreat. There may be hope for him yet. Jackson set the data pad down and grinned. Maybe, just maybe, the Battle Queen was beginning to see more than just a cosmic accident. Maybe she was beginning to see him. The invitation was printed in 5 languages, wrapped in gold foil, and smelled faintly of plasma ink. That should have been the first warning. It's just a formal ball axis, the palace AI said cheerfully. An opportunity to honor the Emperor's continued survival. You make that sound like it's a surprise, Jackson muttered. It statistically is. The Altarian court ball was held in the Celestial Spire, a floating ballroom of light glass and levitating platforms. It looked like something out of a dream. Or a trap. Jackson arrived in borrowed finery, half-tailored robes that pinched under the arms. Kalara wore armor-polished silk, dark, simple, but dangerously elegant. Her gold eyes scanned the room like a hawk scanning for mice. Try not to insult anyone tonight, she whispered. I thought you were here to prevent that. I'm here to stop assassins. The diplomats are your problem. For 20 minutes, things went well. Jackson made awkward conversation with 6-legged trade envoys. He nodded politely through 5 courses of food he couldn't pronounce. He even smiled at a holographic opera performance that made his ears bleed. Then Ambassador Sereth approached, a tall, silver-skinned delegate from the Aerolith dynasty. Sharp teeth, smoother words. The kind of being who could smile while planning planetary invasions. Your Majesty, Sereth said smoothly, I see your consort still shadows your every step. She prefers to be called Kalara. Yes, well, Sereth's eyes flicked to her. It must be frustrating, being bound to a fragile species. So soft, so brief, so easily replaced. Jackson didn't speak. He'd learned, sometimes silence hurt more than shouting. But Kalara stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. Say that again, she said. Sereth's grin widened. I merely wondered how much longer you'll pretend that one cycle of imperial law makes him your equal. Kalara's hands clenched. He is more than my equal. Sereth snorted. He's a placeholder, a political joke, a weak little... He never finished. Kalara's dagger hit the wall beside his head, humming with kinetic charge. The entire ballroom froze. Finish that sentence, she said softly, and I'll finish you. Jackson stared at her. So did half the galaxy. Kalara didn't flinch. Not when the guard stepped closer, not when the music cut out, not even when Sarah stepped back with a trembling smirk. I see, he said. So the rumors were true. What rumors? Jackson asked. That the battle queen of Razan, Sarah sneered, has grown fond of her little emperor. Kalara said nothing, but she didn't deny it. That night back in the palace, Jackson stopped outside her door. She opened it before he knocked. You didn't have to defend me, he said. Yes, she replied, I did. Mayuri. She looked tired. Not in body, she never looked physically tired, but in the soul-deep, exhausted from fighting kind of way. Because I've seen what happens to emperors who stand alone, she said. And I've seen what happens to women who are used as weapons. And fwayim, so do I need a pin of funds. I won't let either happen again, not to you. They stood in silence, staring at each other through the open doorway. And then in a voice just above a whisper, she said, You don't need to win every battle, Jackson, just the ones that matter. He nodded. And this time, he was the one who stepped closer. The summons came at dawn. A sleek obsidian courier ship bearing the seal of the Zarathi High Command landed in the royal courtyard without warning. Axis confirmed its legitimacy. Kalara Ven was being recalled. Strategic reassignment, Axis said, as if it meant nothing. The Dominion has need of her. No, Jackson said, voice quiet. I have need of her. Kalara didn't speak for a long time. Finally, she said this was always temporary. Jackson followed her to the war deck without saying much. She moved like she always did, focused, precise, armored in more ways than one. Are you going? He finally asked. She turned to face him. Orders are orders. I was never meant to stay. What if I ordered you to stay? She almost smiled. You wouldn't. Try me. Kalara stepped closer, her voice low. If you command me to stay, I will. But I'll resent you for it. And eventually I'll stop respecting you. That's a hell of a choice. No, she said. That's what leadership looks like. Sacrifice. Jackson clenched his fists. What if I don't care about being a good emperor? You care too much, she said, brushing a hand briefly, too briefly, against his chest. That's why this hurts. At the launch pad, nobles and guards stood at attention. But they didn't see him. Not really. They saw a symbol in robes, a placeholder. Only she had seen him. You once said I see you, Jackson said quietly. Do you see me now? Kalara stopped at the top of the boarding ramp. Her hand hovered near the activation panel. She looked back, and for the first time her voice cracked. I see you too well. Then she was gone. That night the palace felt like a museum, silent, cold, filled with relics of things no longer alive. Axis offered tea. Jackson ignored it. He stared out the window for hours. Finally he whispered, Bring up the treaty. The Zarathi withdrawal clause, Axis asked. No, Jackson said. The Imperial override. There was a pause. Jackson, are you sure? No, he admitted. But I'm done watching everything I care about leave. The next morning, a Zarathi warship was intercepted at the edge of Imperial space. A single encrypted message was transmitted aboard. Return to Centrolis. This is not an order. It's an invitation, not from your emperor, from Jackson. It broke every protocol, violated 3 treaties, and still 3 hours later, Kalara Ven stood outside his quarters. Armor gone, mask gone, everything else still blazing. You're insane, she said. He grinned. Not yet, but you're welcome to push me over the edge. She stepped closer. You just broke 5 galactic laws. Then maybe it's time we write new ones. Your Highness, you have violated Articles 3, 7, and 14 of the Interstellar Sovereignty Accord. The words echoed like hammer strikes across the Tri-Council chamber. 72 galactic leaders watched in silence, some with curiosity, others with thinly veiled contempt. Jackson didn't flinch. He stood straight, formal robes adjusted just enough to hide his shaking hands. Next to him, Kalara Ven stood in ceremonial black and silver, unyielding, unblinking, unafraid. The lead voice belonged to Arch-Chancellor Vern, a being composed entirely of living crystal and diplomatic venom. You issued a military override on a Dominion vessel for personal reasons. I invited a Zarathi general to return, Jackson replied calmly. There was no military force, no coercion. You exploited your position for emotional indulgence. Jackson tilted his head. Or maybe I acted like a leader who values loyalty over protocol. There were murmurs among the council seats. Vern's crystalline facets gleamed in irritation. You risk destabilizing centuries of treaties over what infatuation? Kalara finally stepped forward. Her voice was low, even, and dangerous. Say it again, and this time look me in the eye. Vern did not. Jackson raised a hand. Let me be clear. I didn't break the law out of desire. I challenged it because the law was built by those afraid of connection. More murmurs, louder now. You fear what happens when soldiers and rulers aren't just tools, he continued. When we become people. A counselor from the Roveri tribes leaned forward. And what is she to you than a political asset, a consort, a symbol? No, Jackson said. She's the reason I haven't died. The reason I've learned. The reason this empire still stands. He turned to Kalara. She's my equal. Kalara's jaw tightened. Her golden eyes flicked just briefly to his hand, the one now trembling at his side. Then she took it. In front of everyone. It was not protocol. It was not law. It was truth. And in that silent moment, it broke the room. Some stood in outrage. Others watched with a new unsettling curiosity. Arch-Chancellor Vern tried one last time. This sets a dangerous precedent. If emotion rules the empire, what stops others from rewriting their oaths, their bonds? Jackson stepped toward the center of the hall, his voice steady. Then let the precedent begin. If a law cannot make room for loyalty, sacrifice, and love, then it is not worthy of our stars. When the vote came, it was close. But it passed. Barely. The motion to sanction the emperor failed by one vote. Later, no one would confirm it, but rumor had it that the Marian delegate, a telepathic jellyfish, had changed its mind halfway through the session, possibly because it had felt something it hadn't expected from the humans. That night on the high balcony of Centrolis Prime, Kalara leaned beside Jackson in silence. You just rewrote interstellar protocol, she said. He shrugged. I wanted to impress you. You already had. They watched the stars in silence. Closer now, and no longer alone. His name was Commander Vrax Thorn, and before Jackson ever met him, he knew three things. He was a war hero of the Zarathi Dominion. He had once been Kalara's closest battle companion, and he wanted Jackson dead. The official summons came wrapped in blood-red synth paper. A formal challenge under Zarathi Honor Code 94.2, still binding under Imperial law due to the interspecies union, a duel to the death. He can't do this, Jackson said, pacing the war room. Right, tell me he can't. He can, Kalara said quietly. And you accepted when you took the oath of bonded leadership. Then unbond me. She didn't answer, because she couldn't. Kalara looked pale, not afraid she didn't do fear, but distant, haunted. Who is he to you, Jackson asked finally. She hesitated. We trained together, fought together. He thought there would be more. Jackson swallowed. Did you? She met his gaze. Not after I met you. The arena was silent. A force field dome shimmered above, containing the air, the heat, the weight of eyes. Vrax stood in the center, 7.6 battle-scarred, holding a dual-bladed glaive the size of a starboard wing. You, he snarled, dared to touch what was mine. I didn't touch, Jackson replied, stepping into the circle. She reached. The duel began. Jackson lasted 37 seconds before being disarmed. He ducked, stumbled, rolled. Training sessions with Kalara had made him faster, not good, not deadly, but unpredictable. Vrax roared and struck again. Jackson caught the blade on his gauntlet. Sparks flew. You're weak, Jackson grunted, and yet, still here. High above Kalara stood with her fists clenched. She couldn't intervene. Not without violating her own warrior code. Not without proving Vrax right. But her every instinct screamed move. Blood hit the sand. Jackson's not Vrax's. He could barely stand. His breath came ragged. But when the final blow came, he sidestepped barely and drove the shock end of his gauntlet into Vrax's exposed flank. Vrax dropped. Not dead, but defeated. Jackson stood over him, breathing hard, and then stepped back. I'm not here to win Kailara, he said. I'm here because she chose me. That's the difference. The arena was silent. And then Kailara walked in. Straight past Vrax, straight to Jackson. She touched his shoulder gently, reverently. You've made your point, she said. Jackson coughed blood. Did I at least look cool doing it? She smiled, terrifying. Later, when medics patched him up, Jackson lay on the palace balcony, bruised and broken and whole. Kailara knelt beside him, brushing hair from his face. You weren't supposed to survive that. He grinned through cracked lips. I wasn't supposed to survive any of this. The hologram flickered above the polished obsidian table. Supreme Commander of the Galactic Defense Coalition terms. Lifetime appointment, authority, unquestioned conditions. Complete political neutrality, including termination of Imperial consort status. Kailara read the words in silence. The message had been delivered by 12 ships and a dozen envoys, all swearing loyalty to her. Not Jackson, not the Empire. Her. They spoke of honor, of duty, of how the galaxy needed a leader who didn't bleed when stabbed through the heart. They offered her everything she had once dreamed of. Except him. Jackson found her on the war balcony, the same place they always ended up when the sky felt heavier than usual. I heard he said, she didn't turn. Of course you did. You have spies now. I have axes, same thing. They stood in silence, the stars shifting slowly above them. Then he asked, are you going? Still no answer. I won't stop you, he said quietly. I can't. Kailara finally turned. Her eyes shimmered with something he couldn't name. I've wanted command since I could hold a blade, she said. I've spent my life proving I deserved it. And now, I finally have something I don't want to lose. He took a step closer. I never asked you to stay. I know, but I need you to know something. If you leave, I'll survive. I'll lead. But it won't mean much. Her voice cracked just a little. You're better than you think. Not without you. The air between them felt electric, not with desire this time, but dread. She raised the hologram and looked at it one last time, then crushed it in her palm. It shattered into blue sparks. I already made my choice, Kailara said. She closed the distance between them and laid her hand on his heart. I don't want to command a fleet. I want to build a future. Jackson whispered with me. With you, she replied. And if the stars don't like it, they can burn. The rift opened over Centralis Prime like a wound in the sky. Not a portal, not a wormhole. A scar bleeding darkness and fire. Within minutes, the stars disappeared. And from the void came the Nither swarm, beings older than memory, feeding on civilizations like moths to flame. Alarm screamed across the capital. Jackson stood in the war chamber, watching the red blink of systems falling offline. Status, he barked. Outer defense grid compromised, Axis replied. The rift is expanding. We are under full-scale galactic incursion. Kailara was already armored, already moving. We don't have time for strategy, she said. We need a stand. The Imperial commanders wanted evacuation. The Council wanted negotiations. Kailara wanted blood. Jackson wanted her to live. We'll fight, he said. Kailara paused. We? You didn't really think I'd let you run toward death alone, did you? Her eyes shimmered, then hardened. Then we fight. The capital descended into chaos. Kailara took the skies in her dropship, a beast of a vessel forged in the Dominion's black moons. Jackson led the ground defenses. They didn't sleep, didn't eat, just fought, side by side, scar to scar. The swarm was relentless creatures of void steel and shrieking minds. Some walked, some flew, some just consumed. By day 3, half the palace was gone. By day 4, Kailara's armor was cracked. By day 5, Jackson's left arm wouldn't move, shattered. And still they stood. The turning point came at the Sunspire Bridge, the last shield barrier protecting civilian shelters. The swarm broke through. Jackson and Kailara were the only ones left standing. He turned to her. If this is it, it's not, she growled. Esfinen, how do you know? Because I'm not done loving you yet. She charged the bridge. He followed. And somewhere in the blaze and screams and broken sky, the swarm began to fall back. Not because they were outnumbered, but because they had never seen two souls fight like that, not for power, not for conquest, but for each other. When the final wave collapsed and the rift began to close, Kailara fell to her knees beside Jackson's body, burned, broken, barely breathing. He blinked at her and whispered, "Was it enough?" She laughed through tears. It was everything. Jackson awoke to the smell of antiseptic and the quiet hum of medbots. His body felt like a collapsed moon. But when he turned his head and saw Kalara asleep beside him, head resting on his chest plate, he smiled. He was still alive. So was she. So was the Empire. The war was over. The rift was closed. The swarm was gone for now. And in their wake, a galaxy stunned into silence. Because the saviors were not a fleet, not a prophet, not a weapon, but a man and a woman who had once hated the very idea of standing beside each other. The Galactic Council convened once more. But this time, they stood when Jackson entered. Not because of his title, but because of what he'd done. Kalara followed. No longer just a commander, no longer a consort. She was now known as the Flame of Centrolis. And the people chanted her name even louder than his. A motion was proposed, one not seen in centuries, to rewrite the ancient codes, to allow bonded leadership between species, to recognize love as a form of alliance. There were debates, protests, and then a vote. It passed unanimously. That night, on the same balcony where their story had truly begun, Jackson took Kalara's hand. "I didn't want this throne," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Regret it now." He smiled. "Not if you're next to me." She leaned in. Her forehead rested against his. "Then let's rebuild it, together." And they did. Not as ruler and soldier. Not as man and woman, but as equals whose bond became the foundation of a better galaxy. In the years that followed, legends would be told about the emperor who didn't fight with armies, and the warrior who didn't conquer with fear, but together rewrote destiny with love.